Hello everybody. Today we're going to look at the notion that we are in many ways insane in the way that we think and in the way that we experience our minds, and how if we can get to the point where we acknowledge that and can understand it, then we begin to get tiny little glimpses into how peaceful it is to not be a slave to our insanity. So whenever I'm doing a talk or teaching a workshop, one of the things that I always look at is our minds, because our minds are mad. In a nutshell, we could just end the video here. Am I mad? Done. But they really are, and I liken them to toddlers. Not that I'm saying toddlers are mad. I love toddlers, but their mind in our adult heads are like toddlers. So a toddler comes to the house, and because of the nature of toddler, runs around, has no conceptual thought about the mess it might make, and there's lasagna on the wall and vomit on the carpet and toys everywhere, and then the toddler goes to sleep. And that would possibly be, in my experience of my toddlers, that would probably be the life of a toddler. I'm sure there are different ones out there, but my experience. And in many ways our minds are very similar. They run around in our minds, in our heads, all day, creating chaos. And when I mean chaos, it's often very useful to consider how many useful thoughts we have a day. Because for me, anyway, not many, unless I'm being really present. You know, our minds are so busy making stuff up that they create internal chaos. And until we're awake to this, we believe our minds. We really, really believe that our minds are right. And we put them in charge of everything. And then you wonder why the world is like it is. Because minds are in charge. Minds are terrible masters. But get them under control and they're wonderful servants. They're just not good at taking charge of things in a believable way. So perhaps I've used this analogy before in another video, I can't remember, but the way I try and explain the mind before we start to get it under control is that we are all in a nightclub or a disco, whatever you want to call it. I'm a bit old for raves, but that kind of thing. And it's noisy and you can't really think, but you're thinking and you're with lots of people, there isn't any space, but you're possibly having a good time. And then if you take a bird's eye view above that disco rave or nightclub, and you see that this event is actually happening in a shed, and everyone's in this shed being really noisy, and beginning to understand that there might be some insanity in this allows you to start poking your head out of the shed, and outside of the shed is the most beautiful and peaceful landscape that can be imagined. A sane landscape. And the more we control our minds, the more we allow ourselves to move into the peace and tranquility and beauty of that sane landscape. We often pop back into the rave because we've got quite a lot of fun there. Even if it's the fun of being right or being a victim, we sort of have a lot of fun there. But coming out of it and being present is very, very peaceful. And that's how I look at the insanity of the mind before and after we start to understand this stuff, is that our minds are mad. They convince us of things. You know, how many times have you heard someone say something like, oh, I saw the look on his face and I knew exactly what he was thinking. And then they go on to tell you exactly what they were thinking, and it either makes that person right or it illustrates the point, but it normally illustrates the point so that person's right. You know, if anyone could read minds that well, make a living from it. That's awesome. You'd be brilliant. I'm just not convinced many people or anyone can read minds. I don't know. I've just never experienced it. You know, we allow so many stories in our minds to make us unhappy and sad or cross or frustrated. And we allow those minds to spin around, make us right, other people wrong, and generally drive us mad. You know, you can be driving along the road and someone beeps their horn at you and it makes you jump. And normally when it makes us jump, it brings up different kinds of feelings: anxiety, frustration, anger, fear. And rather than see that bodily reaction, our mind goes straight in, starts making a story up. I'm calling that person a name, or talking to our passenger about how we were right, really. Was that really me? Who does he think he is? Who does she think she is? And in actual fact, that was a noise. That was a noise that made us jump. And then we make all this story up. It may not even have been to do with us, but we make it up. And our minds latch on to things all the time to make a story up about and create enormous suffering, stress, anxiety, fear, for nothing else than us believing a mind that is insane. And that's where this stuff comes in. Whatever it is we're learning to deal with it, whether we're meditating or whether we're questioning the mind or whether we're learning about reality, underneath it all, understanding that this internal dialogue in our head isn't real. It just isn't. It can bring stories in from the past, but find anyone in your life that agrees exactly with your version of the past. There possibly isn't one, because everyone sees it differently. So when someone says to me, yes, but that happened, you know, you say it's in the past, but it happened. Yeah, I get that it happened. Your version of it is what you bring into the present. And let's look at why the need to bring the version of it into the present exists. It might be that we need to let something go. It might be that we need to question something. Normally, especially if it's a suffering one, it's about how someone else behaved. And if we could just get that person to understand how they behaved hurt us and that they were in fact wrong, we would be at peace. And that's not true. That's not where your peace lies. Your peace can never lie in someone else behaving differently, because that gives them a job. And it asks them to agree with your mind's version of the past and change their behaviour accordingly so that you can feel better about your version of the past. When actually real peace comes from being present. And then your version of the past doesn't exist anywhere. It can't. When you are present here now, thoughts don't exist. And the more you practice it, the more you realise which thoughts you bring in all the time. It may be then you need some help with that if you want to have that. But understand that our peace lies in understanding our insanity. And when we begin to understand our insanity, we begin to have glimpses of being sane. And then we stop making everyone else responsible for our present being okay, because we make our present okay. We move out of the rave, the disco, the nightclub, into the forest and the tranquility of the lake. And we're able to be there presently. And when we sit presently without thought, a whole world opens up. And as I say in lots of these, don't believe me, go and live it. A whole world opens up where life tends to simply unfold in front of you. The best thing for me has been that I don't seem to be late when I'm sort of known for being late. So what happens when I let everything go, I tend to sort of arrive everywhere at the time I'm meant to arrive. And if I don't question it, it carries on. And if I start trying to make it happen, it doesn't happen. and I'm not saying that happens for you, that's my perception and experience, but it's been a very pleasurable one, because sitting in traffic, I don't resist. If you don't resist the traffic, okay, this is how it is. Tend to get there on time. Not sure how, but there we go. It's just simply sitting with what is, and knowing that our insanity argues with what is and fights to take you to the past or the future and tell a story that's more interesting than now. But that is our insanity. And our suffering or our anxiety or our arguments, our frustration, our inner war comes from allowing that and just very simply not being present with what is. And being present with what is isn't so bad. And you get your mind going, well, and a bit boring. But that's because you haven't been out in that tranquil space long enough for it to become part of you. It just takes a bit of practice. And then you can let everyone off the hook. You know, in the video about forgiveness and how it frees you and not them, it's about understanding that you let it all off the hook when you are present with your own mind and you allow yourself to see its insanity and catch it. And that would be the best thing, is that when you finally laugh at your own insanity, then you know you're sort of there. And I remember one of those moments. So I was on holiday and husband was sitting here and our best mate Matt was sitting there, and we both know him really well, and we were reading, I think, or something, and I did this to my husband on his shoulder, looking as if I was being very loving, and I had this moment of and I went, Matt, okay, look at how unconsciously vain I am being. I'm pretending to be nice and loving to husband, but actually my arm looked a bit thinner if I sat there like this. Anyone? Anyone want to look at the insanity of that moment? Who was looking at my arm? I don't know. But I believe the thought around arms needing to be thinner than they actually are, whatever arm. And I'd found a way to make what I didn't even think about this one. What made me think I ought to make this one look thin? Don't know. And then why in front of Matt? Sorry, Matt. And then made it look like a loving gesture. And it's a wonderful example of unconscious insanity that didn't even hurt anybody. It was just crackers. And so when you start catching that insanity and finding it funny, you're on your way, because we are deliciously mad. I mean, really deliciously mad. And you can fall in love with the brilliance of your mad mind and not let it rule, and let your arms be the size that they are. And your life opens up for you. Lovely to speak, and I'll see you on the next video.